Welcome to another wonderful Brenda Maxfield audiobook. We are excited to have you with us. Before we begin the story, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. This allows us to continue adding free clean Amishromance audiobooks for you to enjoy. The following title is copyrighted by Brenda Maxfield, Amishromance author. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and enjoy the story. Leaving Hollybrook, Mellie's Story, Book 2. Chapter 1. I will instruct thee and teach thee in the way which thou shalt go. I will guide thee with mine eye. Psalm 33 verse 8, King James Version. Beth fought tears as she hugged Mellie goodbye. The whole family stood, hovering close, including her eldest brother and his family. But for Beth, leaving her sister Mellie was the worst. "I'll miss you," Beth whispered in Mellie's ear. She let go of Mellie's thin shoulders and stepped away, sniffling. "Right when you get settled," her sister-in-law Ruthie interrupted. "And you take care now." Ruthie glanced at her 4 young children. "All right. You've said your goodbyes. Now let's get back to your chores." The 4 children moaned but obediently trotted off. Beth looked at her grandpa, who stood slightly hunched. He gazed back, a pained look on his face. "Please don't worry, Grandpa," Beth said, moving to give him one more quick hug. "I'll be back to visit soon." Grandpa nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. "I know you will. Teach them children well." "I will." Beth swallowed past the knot in her throat. She had no idea saying goodbye would be so difficult. Taking the teaching position at Meadow Lark had been her idea, and the community was only 2 hours' distance away by van, so it wasn't like she was leaving across the country. But that's how it felt. She glanced at her van driver, Isaac Grover. He'd taken her to Meadow Lark the month before to interview for the job. Now he sat behind the driver's wheel, looking to be in no hurry to pull away. But Beth suddenly desired to be on the road. Enough of the farewells. She could hardly breathe as it was. She gave one last wave and climbed into the van. Mellie rushed forward to shut the door for her. For a moment their eyes locked, and then Mellie stepped back. "You ready, Beth?" Isaac asked. "Yes." "Go. Please." Beth tore her glance away from her family and stared straight ahead through the windshield, but she couldn't help herself as they turned from the drive. She cast one last glance behind her, seeking out her mother who sat on the porch. Mam's arthritis was so bad that day that she couldn't stand with them on the drive. She'd said her goodbyes from the rocker. "You excited about your teaching?" Isaac asked, his voice pleasant. Beth looked at him. "Yes. I'm right excited." And she was. Teaching had been her dream for years, but she'd never thought she'd be able to do it. She'd learned about her new position in Meadow Lark one afternoon at the Feed and Supply. A small notice had been posted on the bulletin board. "Looking for teacher in Meadow Lark. Grades 1 through 8. Room and board plus small salary provided. Send inquiries to Deacon Knepp, School Board 2213, Romer Road, Meadow Lark, Indiana." Her heart had roared in her chest as she read the notice. This was what she'd dreamed of for years. Keeping it secret, she had applied and received a reply. She'd sneaked away for the interview. Beth had pondered more than once why she'd felt compelled to keep it to herself. When it came down to it, she decided it had been fear. Plain and simple. She'd been afraid that her brother or her grandpa or someone else in authority would have forbidden her to do it. But if it was already done, then they would most likely agree. Had she been right? She didn't know. But now it was done and there she was, on her way to a new life. "When do the children start school?" Isaac asked, snapping her from her reverie. In a week. I wanted a bit of time to set up the schoolhouse. He nodded and flipped on his turn signal. Beth gazed out the window, tensing as they passed the Glick's farm. Her breathing increased and without wanting to, she stared hard at the property. She should look away, for if Caleb was anywhere near, she shouldn't see him. But she couldn't stop herself. Her eyes wouldn't budge as they drove down the road. Her breath caught, and her hands instinctively rose to press on the window glass. There he was, standing next to the barn, looking straight at her. She gulped but didn't shift her gaze. He made no gesture of recognition, no movement to wave, no nothing. She didn't blame him. He'd been ready to ask her to marry him. She'd expected it and dreaded it. She liked Caleb. She liked him a lot. And she knew he'd be a wonderful husband. To someone else. She wanted to teach. In retrospect, she should have at least let him in on her plan. He'd learned about her position from her sister Mellie, which was probably not the best way to find out. Beth craned her neck, not breaking her stare until the Glick farmhouse and barn were out of sight. Caleb hadn't even smiled at her. But then, why would he? She'd broken his heart. She directed her attention back out the front window of the van. She needed to get over it. Move on. Even so, her breathing became labored, and she had to force herself to remain steady. She closed her eyes and exhaled. Clasping her hands tightly in her lap, she assured herself for the 1000th time that she had done the right thing in breaking it off with Caleb. It wasn't that long ago that it happened. She had been waiting for him under the oak tree bordering his parents' property. They'd often met there, usually to exchange a few words about their days and to share a laugh or two. But that afternoon, there was no laughing done. Caleb had approached her slowly with a look of wariness on his face. Of course, he already knew what she was about to say. Caleb? His name was soft on her lips. He didn't answer. He only stepped closer, close enough for her to see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. He held his straw hat in his hand. You heard, she continued. He nodded. Well. Her stance was stiff, and her shoulders ached with the tension. I was going to tell you, even to her own ears, her words sounded flat. Yes, he asked, his brows raised. I assumed you would. He looked at her intently. I'd hoped you would have brought me into your plan sooner. Mellie told me. So she said. I'd suspected you would leave. Fact is, when you went missing and Mellie was in such a stew, I mentioned the teacher opening to her. Did you? Beth's throat was tight. So, I'm right glad for you, Beth. Beth studied his face. Did he mean it? His look of wariness was gone. She thought she saw relief. But then, that would make no sense, would it? Thank you, she whispered. At least now I know. He stepped back, not taking his eyes from her. Yes. Now you know. You'll be there a year? Or more? I'm not sure. Caleb nodded and put his hat back on, pushing it low on his forehead. I see. Caleb, Beth's voice faded. What was she to say? That she was sorry she was going? But she wasn't sorry. That she regretted leading him on? She blew out her breath in a huge sigh. She'd never intended to lead him on. If it hadn't been for the teaching possibility, she probably would have married him. Her mind flitted to her sister Mellie. Mellie loves Caleb. Of course, Caleb had no idea. Boys could be so dense. But Beth knew. Mellie never breathed a word of it, but Beth would have been blind not to see it. Mellie hung on every word Caleb said. She lit up like the stars at night when he was near. Considering everything, maybe Beth wouldn't have married Caleb after all. She didn't love him enough. Not the way Mellie did, anyway. This is goodbye then, Caleb had said, his voice louder now. Be blessed, Beth Fisher. Tears sprang to Beth's eyes. Thank you, Caleb. She'd reached out and squeezed his arm. Then she dropped her hand from him quickly and turned, fleeing back down the street. The tears had flowed down her cheeks, and she hadn't bothered to wipe them away. All she could think about was that it was over. She'd told him. And now she was free. Free. What an odd thing to feel. Feeling free wasn't something that was discussed or desired. A girl wasn't ever really free. She had to honor the directive of her father and older brothers, and then her husband. Also, there were the church leaders and the bishop to be obeyed. So, as her bare feet had padded over the asphalt, Beth was stunned at her soaring sense of freedom. It was delicious, but it felt so unusual that immediate doubt spread through her. Surely, she wasn't to feel such abandon. Surely, it wasn't seemly. Her feet had slowed to a walk and then to a crawl. She'd pressed her hands to her chest and marveled at what was happening to her. She was a teacher. A real teacher. She didn't have to secretly yearn for it any longer. It was true, for sure and for certain. Beth had turned into her drive and walked up the dirt and rock path. She would begin packing that very evening. The trip to Meadow Lark was uneventful and, except for a question or two from Isaac, quiet, which suited Beth just fine. She wasn't in the mood for idle chatter. Her mind was completely consumed with her upcoming tasks. She'd been given a quick tour of the schoolhouse on the day she'd come for the questioning. It looked similar to the school in Hollybrook, only it was smaller, with only one main room. The wooden building was painted white with windows on all four sides. There were side steps leading up to a covered porch. Inside, the desks were old and well-used. The chalkboard was scuffed up plenty, but Deacon Knepp assured her that it would be repainted before school began. She'd glimpsed a pile of workbooks and tattered textbooks lining the bookshelf that was situated behind the teacher's desk. The whole scene had caused Beth's heart to beat wildly with excitement. So, when Isaac turned onto the miller's property where Beth was to board, her hands were sweaty with anticipation. "Here we are, Beth," Isaac said, cutting his engine. Beth looked up to see the entire Miller family pour out onto the porch to greet her. Her eyes flashed over the 7 children, taking particular note of the 4 youngest ones who would be in her class. Mrs. Miller gave her a friendly wave. Mr. Miller stood with his thumbs hooked around his suspenders, rocking back and forth, a smile on his face. Beth climbed out of the van and only took a step before she was surrounded by 5 children. They stood with shy smiles, but none of them spoke. "Now, children," Mrs. Miller said. "Give your teacher a minute to catch her breath. Land sake, she's been in that contraption for a couple hours now." Beth heard Isaac snicker at Mrs. Miller's reference to his van as that contraption. "Is that all you'll be needing, Beth?" Isaac asked her. Beth was glad she'd already paid him so she wouldn't have to do it with all those eyes peering at her. She gave Isaac a warm smile. "Thank you. Thank you for your help and for the transportation." Isaac touched his forehead in a gesture of farewell. "I'll be going then. You let me know if you need a ride in the future." "I will. Thank you." Beth gave him a wave, and he was off. "We got drivers around here," Mr. Miller said. "No need to be bothering someone from Hollybrook." One of the children, Becky, if Beth remembered correctly, spoke up. "Hi, Beth." Her voice was soft, and she looked at Beth with eyes full of adoration. Beth was taken back. She hadn't expected any of her students to be so predisposed to like her. "Hello? It's Becky," Isn't it? Becky beamed. Yes. I'm Becky. I'm 10. That's a right fine age, Beth said with a warm smile. I'm Penny, said another girl who was at least a foot shorter than Becky. Hello, Penny. Girls, what did I say? Give the teacher some breathing space. Mrs. Miller chuckled and stepped forward. Andrew, quit standing around like a three-legged lamb. Get the teacher's bags. Andrew, who looked to be 15 or better, trotted down the steps to grab Beth's larger suitcase. Beth held the smaller one herself, and he didn't approach her for it. You'll be living in the grandpa house, Becky said. I'll show you. We'll all show her. Mrs. Miller started the parade around to the back of the house. Beth gazed at the cozy little grandpa house and realized it would be the first time in her life that she'd have a space all her own. It was a wonder to think about. Would she be lonely? She smiled to herself. How could a person be lonely when they had books? Mrs. Miller, is there a public library in Meadow Lark? Mrs. Miller paused and considered. Yes. I'm thinking there is. We never go. She gave Beth a sharp look. You spend a lot of time at public libraries? Beth heard the censure in her tone, and she quickly assured the woman. No. Not really. However, sometimes I find them most helpful in finding information on animals and farming. They do have some nice simple stories to practice reading, too. She hoped her answer would calm the woman's obvious concern. 2 things, Mrs. Miller said. You are to call me Wilma. I can't have you living under my roof calling me Mrs. Miller, now, can I? And you can call my husband Ephraim. Second thing. We got plenty of reading books at the school. You won't be needing no public library. Oh, I wasn't suggesting that the school had no books, Beth interjected. I was just wondering. That's all. Beth sucked in her breath, wondering if she'd already gotten herself into trouble after she'd only been there for a mere 10 minutes. Mr. Miller opened the door to the grandpa house. Make yourself to home. I'm heading back out to the fields. He gave her a nod and left, his heavy black boots thumping across the porch. Wait, Dat. Andrew put down Beth's suitcase just inside the door. I'll go with you. He hurried away, along with his 2 brothers. Wilma shook her head. Oh, them boys. They ain't exactly social critters. But she laughed with obvious affection. Now, we girls will stick together. By the way, this here is our Martha. She's 14. And this here is our Susan. She's 8. You already know Becky and Penny. Hello, girls, Beth said. Now, come on in and see your rooms. Beth walked in and gazed around. The front room housed a davenport, 2 rockers, a warming stove, and a small kitchen table with 4 chairs. The kitchen itself was at the far end of the room, against the wall. There was a stove, a small fridge, a sink, a counter, and cupboards. Now, them appliances run on propane, so if they don't work, we got to refill the tank. You just let us know. But you probably won't be needing them much in any case. We figure you'll be taking most of your meals with us. Beth nodded. All right. Thank you. Wilma shrugged. No need to be thanking me. It's part of the arrangement. Your bedroom's back here, Becky said. Beth followed her into a short back hall. The first door opened to a bedroom with a double bed. A beautiful blue and white quilt covered it. Beth went to it, fingering the fine stitches. This is lovely. Just a regular old quilt, Wilma said, but her puffed-out chest revealed her pride. Now, our Martha helped me on that one. Me, too, ma'am, Penny said. Wilma nodded. You're right at that, Penny. You did help with organizing the pieces and cutting the thread. Well, you did a lovely job, Beth said, smiling at Penny. Now, why don't you get unpacked and then Becky here will run you over to the school. It's a stone's throw down the road, which is why the school board likes us to board the teachers. I'd love to go to the school. It won't take me long to unpack at all. Becky, would you like to help me? Becky glanced at her mother for permission. When Wilma nodded, Becky grinned widely. I would like to help you. Then, that's settled. Now, Becky, you show her where the bathroom is, and then I think that's it. Come on, girls, let's get back to our chores. Wilma herded the other 3 girls out the door. Supper is at 6 o'clock, were Wilma's parting words. Beth took a deep breath and gazed about the room. Her view through the window stretched out across vast fields of corn. It would soon be harvesting time, and Beth knew how busy it would get. Bathroom's the other door, Becky said, interrupting her thoughts. Want to go see it? Beth shook her head. No. I'll be fine. Here, give me a hand. Let's put the suitcase on the bed. Together they unpacked Beth's dresses and cape and coat. Beth put her undergarments in the drawer. She placed the few books she owned on the bedside table. These your own books? Becky asked. Yes. I wish I had some books of my own, she said. Ma'am thinks books aren't necessary for much but schooling. They are, though, ain't they? Beth decided to tread carefully. The last thing she wished to do was contradict Mrs. Miller to her daughter. Do you like to read? She asked, answering Becky with a question of her own. Oh, it's my favorite thing ever, Becky said with a long sigh. Then shall we go to the school and see what all is there? Not so many books, Becky said. Our last teacher only used the workbook mostly. Beth responded. She tucked her empty suitcase under the bed. Can you take me now? Becky's eyes lit up. You ready? I'm ready. Let's go. Chapter 2. The two of them wandered through the yard and down the drive. At the main road, Becky turned left, and Beth followed. It's right over there, Becky said. Beth remembered the schoolhouse well from the day she had come to interview with the school board. She would never forget Deacon Knepp's stern face and sharp businesslike tone. If not for the other, friendlier, board members, she might have turned tail and fled back home. Beth stood before the schoolhouse taking it all in. The white clapboard building looked a bit worn, but not run down. There had been evident care taken to the flower beds out front. A large willow tree swept across the side yard. To the left, she saw the beaten-down grass where the children obviously enjoyed recess time. Her heart warmed. She simply couldn't wait to get at it. Come on, Becky said, motioning her forward. I'll show you where I sat last year. They entered the building, and Beth felt a sense of awe. It was as if the very walls reverberated with generations of children and their studious minds and hearts and their shy questions and their eager minds. Beth resisted a sudden urge to bow in prayer, wanting to wait until she was alone. Right here, Becky said, her face glowing. This is my spot. Do I get to sit in the same place this year? Why, Becky, I imagine you'll have to switch to accommodate the grade below. You've moved up to 5th grade now, haven't you? Becky nodded. Yes. I'm in 5th grade now. Only 3 more years after that, and I'm done. Beth's eyes widened. Are you in such a hurry, then? When I'm done with school, I'll have my running around time, and then I'll be baptized into the church. Becky blushed slightly. Then I can be married and have children of my own. Beth frowned slightly. That you can, Becky, she said. Inwardly, She winced at how quickly Becky planned to push her education aside. It bothered Beth, but it was not uncommon. Her own sister Mellie had been eager to be finished with school. Although now that Mellie ran her own sweet shop, she used her math skills daily. Often, Beth yearned to have been able to continue with her schooling. She dreamed of what high school would be like. She imagined herself, elbow deep in books, studying at a library table. In her mind's eye, she saw herself engaging in stimulating discussions about some new scientific discovery. But that's as far as her imaginings went. She really had no idea what high school was like. Plus, she knew that she would be woefully out of place without any real knowledge of computers and such. Beth? Becky questioned. Beth gave a start. Oh, I'm sorry, Becky. Did you say something? Do you want to work a bit? Can I help you? Beth looked around. You can grab that broom over by the wall and sweep up. I'd like to look through some of the workbooks. Becky skipped over to the broom. I swept a lot for Roberta last year. She was our old teacher. Becky leaned on the top of the broom handle. She's getting married. She told me. That's why she's not teaching anymore. Beth nodded, not surprised. She sat down at the teacher's desk and allowed herself a moment to look out over the empty desks. In mere days, they'd be filled with students. Her students. She smiled and opened the top drawer of her desk, noting the pencils and red pen. There was also a handful of rubber bands, 3 erasers, a folded handkerchief, some loose paper clips, and a box of chalk. From the second drawer, she pulled out teacher guides to the workbooks. She'd be teaching 1st grade through 8th grade, and if she remembered correctly, she'd have about 20 students. A right fine number. Excuse me, a low voice came from the door. Beth glanced up to see a man standing there, his felt hat in hand. He was slim, although his broad shoulders strained a bit under his blue shirt. He wore black suspenders and heavy black shoes. His beard was fairly long, but trimmer than many. She liked the looks of him. He appeared both friendly and steady. Can I help you? She asked, rising from her chair. Hello, Timothy, Becky said, pausing in her sweeping. How's Missy? Timothy smiled at Becky. She's right fine, Becky. If you want, you can stop by and play with her some. I'll do that, Becky said. She went back to sweeping. Beth walked across the schoolroom and nodded in greeting. I'm Beth Fisher, the new teacher. I thought as much. His hands worked the rim of his hat. You'll have my Missy and Francis. Missy's 7, and Francis is 6. She's just starting and is mighty nervous. Beth nodded again, thinking that the father seemed nervous himself. She wondered at that. I just thought to stop and meet you. I'll tell the girls. He looked around the room before his startling blue eyes rested on her again. I've got a boy, too. He's only 2, so you won't be learning him for a few more years. Beth laughed softly. I'd say not. The idea of being there after a few years, still teaching, filled her with pleasure. All right, then, Timothy said, heading back out the door. I look forward to meeting your wife, Beth said, her tone friendly. Timothy hesitated, and she saw the muscles in his back tense. He turned. There isn't no wife, he said, his voice soft. We lost her when Benny was born. Beth took a step back. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. How would you? Timothy stood motionless for a moment, then he blinked and tipped his hat. I'll be going now. Just wanted to meet the new teacher. I'm happy to meet you, too, Beth said. She walked back into the school, her mind whirling. Those poor little girls, losing their mother so young. Her heart went out to them. And little Benny. He would never know his mother. Beth paused and looked back through the open door. She saw Timothy walking down the road now, his long stride purposeful. A sadness enveloped her, as if she knew the man well and shared his grief. She shuddered. How absurd. She didn't know him. And most certainly not well enough to feel such heaviness for him. But she did. However, she didn't trouble herself about it for long. The school books were waiting for her. She hustled back across the room to her desk. She sat again with immense satisfaction. She opened a bright red workbook, mentally taking note of how she wanted to begin her first day of assignments. That evening, Beth sat alone in her grandpa's house. A restlessness moved through her. Never in her 22 years had she stayed alone. She missed her sister, Mellie. In truth, she missed her entire family, even her difficult sister-in-law, Ruthie. Beth snickered. No, maybe that was taking it too far. She'd spent 2 hours at the school, organizing things. She had her lessons sketched out, and she hoped she'd done it properly. She knew that often teachers spent time in classrooms as assistants before being given full responsibility. But she had assured the school board that she would be fine. Right then, she didn't feel fine. She felt nervous and unsure. What if she hadn't planned enough? What if the children didn't like her? What if they wouldn't do the work? What was she to do then? She shook her head. Of course, the children would do the work. She couldn't remember one time in her 8 years of schooling that a student had openly refused to do the work. Beth, came a voice from outside the screen door. Wilma. Beth went to the door. You settling in okay? The woman asked. Her hazel eyes were wide and direct. Can't be having no issues now. Beth had no idea what she was referring to, so she simply smiled in return. Will any of your family be visiting you? Wilma asked. Last teacher had kinfolk coming all the time. Beth pondered the question for a minute. Perhaps my sisters will come. Mellie and Faith. I don't know. Mellie runs a sweet shop, so she doesn't have much free time. A sweet shop? Why, that's right nice. She run it by herself. Mostly. We all help out now and again, but it's Mellie's shop. If they do come to visit, they're welcome. Tell them that. And your mama? Will she come? Beth felt the familiar weight settle on her shoulders. No. She suffers from arthritis. She doesn't get about much. Or at all, was the real truth of the matter. Wilma's face crinkled with concern. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Arthritis can be mighty troublesome. Troublesome wasn't the word Beth would put to it. Her mother's rheumatoid arthritis had basically incapacitated her. Even getting her to the family table was a major ordeal. I assume she's taking herbs and such. Beth nodded. Old May has been giving her different concoctions for years. Help any? Beth shook her head. Not so to notice. Wilma's lips pressed together into a frown. Has she been to an English doctor? No. She won't go. Wilma blew out her breath as if she'd been holding it. Good for her. Speaking personal, I don't approve of us Amish running to them English. It ain't fitting, and I can't see as the Lord God would approve none. Beth kept a pleasant look on her face, holding in her growing annoyance. This woman didn't know a thing about her mother. Not a thing. Mellie had been trying to get Ma'am to go to the English doctors for a long time. And Beth was all for it. It was easy to stand there giving opinions when you weren't hurting so badly you couldn't move your little finger without screaming. Glad to know your mama holds firm. Wilma took a step back. You let me know if you need anything. I will. Thank you. Wilma paused. Heard that Timothy Plank came by when you was at the school. Yes. He did. There's a sad story. Her eyes misted over. The whole district was broken-hearted when we lost his good wife. Oh, she was a fine woman. And leaving them children behind. TSK, TSK. Such a shame. Beth leaned against the doorframe. He's a right good father to them kids. His mama helps him take care of them. Wilma put a finger to her lower lip and gave Beth a once-over. Now, he would be a wonderful husband to a girl. And them kids could sure use a new mama. It didn't take much to realize where Mrs. Miller's mind was going. Beth stiffened. She hadn't come to Meadow Lark to find a husband. Food for thought, girl. Food for thought. Wilma chuckled and left the porch, walking back to the big house. Beth watched her go. Then she closed the screen door and went back to sit on the davenport. She laid her head back and closed her eyes. If she'd wanted to get married, she would have stayed in Hollybrook and married Caleb Glick. Once again, she remembered her times with Caleb. He'd made her laugh more than once. She remembered on one of their last buggy rides when he'd pretended he was a screen actor. In truth, neither of them knew much about actors, but Caleb had pretended and Beth had laughed all the way to Edmund's Pond. Pleasant memories. But the memories weren't all good. Seeing the glimmer in his eyes die when she'd told him about teaching had been one of the worst things she'd ever experienced. But if she'd married Caleb, she wouldn't have gotten to teach at all. The Amish rarely hired married women because they were nearly always in the family way. Besides, her own district of Hollybrook didn't need a new teacher, and Caleb wouldn't have considered moving elsewhere. Beth remembered her suspicions that Mellie harbored feelings for her beau. In the beginning, she'd tried to ignore them. But during that last youth singing, right before she had sneaked to Meadow Lark for her interview, she'd observed her sister more closely than usual. Mellie's gaze repeatedly went to Caleb, and there was such a look of longing on her face that Beth's throat tightened in pain. Mellie didn't just harbor feelings for Caleb, she was in love with him. What was worse, Beth knew that Mellie loved Caleb more fervently than she did. Caleb liked Mellie. Well, everyone liked Mellie. But Beth knew that given a chance, Caleb's feelings would deepen, and he would grow to love her. Beth knew this instinctively, and she only hoped that Caleb would forget her and see her sister. Really see her? Beth's eyes remained closed as her mind wandered to Timothy Plank. Like Wilma said, she was sure he'd make a right fine husband. But she wasn't interested. No. Not even a little. Beth spent another half-day at the schoolhouse. More than one mother came by to meet her, children in tow. Beth didn't mind the interruptions one bit. In truth, she loved meeting her students, learning their names, and trying to remember the details their mothers shared with her. She knew that young Tamara liked frogs, and if her mother would let her, their house would be filled with the filthy croaking animals. Tamara had frowned at that, but when Beth gave her a sly wink on the side, the little girl grinned as if they shared a great secret. Beth determined to teach a unit on amphibians during the first month of school. She learned that John couldn't read a lick even though he was nigh onto 7 years old. Beth's heart sank as she watched John during his mother's whispered assessment. Beth had put her hand on John's shoulder and looked him square in the eye. "Well, we'll have to do something about that, won't we, John?" She gave him an encouraging smile, but John dropped his gaze to the ground. Then there was Prudence. She was the mother of 3 students. She spent quite some time giving Beth every detail she could regarding her children. She spoke forever, not coming up for air until Beth feared the woman might faint dead away from lack of oxygen. When Prudence finally gasped in a whooshing breath, she introduced her children. Beth nodded her greeting, and the four of them disappeared back out the door in a whirlwind. Chapter 3. When Beth went back to the miller's for lunch, she was both exhausted and elated. Wilma looked up when she entered through the side door. "How'd it go?" she asked, taking a steaming pot from the cooking stove. "Fine," Beth answered with a smile. "There's a work frolic tomorrow over at the Wagglers." "Did anyone mention it?" "No." "Of course, you'll come. Give you a good chance to meet everyone." Wilma poured the steaming peas into a serving bowl. "What's the frolic for?" "The menfolk are building a new shed, a sizable one at that. And the womenfolk are going to do some canning. Now the children, why I expect they'll be running around underfoot." Wilma paused and gave a hearty chuckle. "As the new schoolteacher, you might want to plan a few games for them. We could play kickball. Or if the children want, we can have some relay races." Beth's mind was already spinning with ideas. "Sounds right good to me." Wilma handed Beth a pitcher of milk. "Can you go out and fill the glasses for me?" "I'd be glad to," Beth murmured, her mind fixed on Saturday's frolic. Early Saturday morning found Beth standing at her bedroom window, gazing out over the acres of rustling corn. She smiled, knowing after the harvest she'd be looking out onto fields of stumps. When she was a little girl, she'd loved to run among the fields right after harvest. She discovered many a snake hidden in those stubby corn stalks. Before she learned of her mother's aversion to crawling things, she'd carted a snake or two home, holding them out in front of her like a long curled lock of hair. "Oh! Get those out of here," her mam would cry, running for cover. But her brothers had appreciated her efforts, gladly taking them off her hands to torment each other, chasing wildly about the yard, holding them out like weapons. Wilma informed her that their wagon would be leaving at 9 o'clock sharp and that Beth needed to be on board and ready to go. Beth glanced at the small clock on her bedside table. She had plenty of time. The night before, she'd gathered some balls from a bin at the schoolhouse, so she was ready for the children. She wished she'd had time to bake some cookies for them as prizes. But surely, the Wagglers would have something she could use for a special treat. From what she'd heard from Wilma, Mrs. Waggler was a wonderful cook. Before heading to the big house for breakfast, Beth took extra care with her appearance. She made sure that her cape dress had no noticeable wrinkles and that she put on her crispest, whitest cap. No doubt she'd be under scrutiny that day, and she wanted to make a good impression. There was a small hand mirror on the dresser. When she was ready to leave, she picked it up and observed herself. There was a definite glimmer in her brown eyes, and she'd managed to get every curl pinned securely into her tight, chestnut-colored bun. Her cap looked pristine. She smiled at herself, grateful that her teeth were straight, unlike her sister Faith's. Although, there was a certain youthful appeal to Faith's crooked front teeth. Beth sighed. If she put any more effort into her looks, it could be considered vanity. She set the mirror down with a decided thump. Enough of all that nonsense. She squared her shoulders and walked outside toward the big house. Her stomach was aflutter with butterflies. She wondered if she'd be able to eat a thing come mealtime. Beth reached down to help Penny into the wagon. Becky, Martha, and Susan were already squished together on the bench below the driver's seat. Ephraim was at the helm, reins in hand. Andrew and Josh sat on the bed of the wagon, laughing and joking together. "Sam," Wilma called, hustling across the front porch. "Where are you?" "We're leaving." She carried a pot filled with creamed potatoes and peas. All the women would bring a contribution of food for a hearty meal at noon. "We'll be the last there," warned Ephraim. "Where is the child?" "Boys, where's your brother?" Wilma asked, handing Andrew her pot. "Probably in the barn," Josh offered. Run, see, would you? Wilma hoisted herself onto the front bench. Land's sakes, I don't like to be late. I'm coming, Sam called, running from the barn. Wait for me. Josh was standing in the wagon, and he reached down and heaved his brother inside. Sam fell on top of Andrew, who worked to keep the pot balanced. No sooner was everyone inside that Ephraim whistled and slapped the reins on the horse. With a gentle heave, the wagon was underway. The ride to the Wagglers was pleasant enough. The morning was already warm, and Beth wished she'd put on her lighter-weight dress or not worn her cape dress at all, for it had more fabric to hold in the heat. Birds flitted through the air, chirping in rhythm with the horse's clip-clop. The mild sway of the wagon as it jostled over the grooves in the side of the road was mesmerizing. Beth found herself nearly lulled into a light sleep. But the antics and conversation of the children kept her alert. She was eager to learn all she could about them, even those too old to attend school. If she was going to live with the Millers, she wanted to be very familiar with them. Are we almost there? Sam asked. Wilma turned around. Right soon. And Sam, you be on your best behavior, do you hear? Sam nodded. Yes, ma'am. We're going to play kickball. Does that sound fun? Beth asked him. He shrugged. I want to help build the shed. Next time, Josh said, tousling his youngest brother's hair. Enjoy playing while you can. Sam grimaced. I can swing a hammer. Sure you can. Everyone knows that, Josh agreed. But still. Play while you can. How about races? You like them? Beth asked. Sam perked up. Races? Yes, I like them fine. All right, then. You can help me set up for them. After that, Sam was in a much happier frame of mind, grinning shyly at Beth more than once. Sitting squished on the hard wooden bench, Beth's backside was a bit sore by the time Ephraim turned onto the Wagglers' land. From the long row of buggies and wagons already parked, Beth feared Ephraim's prediction was correct, and they were the last to arrive. Once their wagon joined the long line, everyone jumped out, males going one direction, females another. Except for the youngest ones who followed Beth. Beth surveyed the front yard. It was dotted with towering trees, but there still seemed to be enough space for a good game of kickball. She handed the larger rubber ball to Sam and the two of them stood beneath an elm tree. What do you say this be home base? She asked. Sam considered it for a moment. Yes. I think it'd be right good. Beth looked toward the house and saw children walking slowly across the yard. She recognized some of them from the day before. Most of them smiled shyly at her, but there were a few who didn't meet her eyes. Beth raised her hand in greeting. Good morning, children. Sam and I are setting up a kickball game. Would you like to play? It was as if the floodgates opened at her words. They all ran toward her then, laughing and choosing teams. Beth stood back and watched, her heart full to bursting. In no time at all, the sides were chosen and the ball was in play. Beth acted as both referee and ardent cheerleader. The sun streamed through the leaves of the tree hot and steady, dappling the ground with pools of light. Beth was perspiring, but she didn't care. The children were having a great time, and she'd learned nearly all their names. That's 3 outs, a tall boy named Gus called out. Switch sides. There were groans and cheers, depending on which side the child was on. Beth laughed and got the children in line for kicking. Good morning, Beth, said a low resonant voice behind her. She swirled around to see Timothy Plank standing there, one child in his arms and 2 young girls at his side. Seeing him sent a jolt through Beth, and to her dismay, she felt her cheeks go hot. Good morning, Timothy, she said. She gazed at the girls. "Hello, girls. I'm so happy to meet you." "This one's Missy," Timothy said, nodding toward the taller of the two. "And this is Francis. Benny here is my son." Beth smiled, trying to stuff down the sudden nervousness she felt. "Would you like to join the game, Missy and Francis?" The two girls nodded solemnly. "Hey, Missy, be on our team," called Becky. "We'll take Francis," Susan hollered from the field. The two girls glanced at their father. He nodded, and they ran to join the game. Beth took a step closer and tweaked Benny's hair from his forehead. "Nice to meet you, too, Benny." Timothy's blue eyes were as clear as the hot sky above. He shifted Benny's weight in his arms. "Some of the older girls are babysitting the young ones," he said. "So I should be taking Benny to them." Beth nodded. "I'm sure he'll have a nice time." Timothy turned as if to leave but hesitated. Beth waited, wondering what more he had to say. She gazed at his arms as he held his son, and she couldn't help but notice how solid they were. He was a strong man, that was easy to see. She wondered what it would feel like to have his arm around her shoulders. Safe, she thought. It would feel safe and warm. Her face flooded with heat. What was she thinking? "Just wanted to welcome you to Meadow Lark," he said. "Don't rightly remember if I did the other day." "Thank you," she murmured. She stepped back, completely flustered. Timothy frowned, and she could see the questions in his eyes. Had he guessed what she'd been thinking about him? Mortified now, she turned abruptly around to the children. Shame burned through her. Never had a man had such an effect on her. Not even Caleb, and she had liked him fine. She could feel Timothy still looking at her, but she didn't dare turn back around. What if her interest in him showed in her eyes? What then? She stumbled to the children waiting their turn to kick the ball. She couldn't afford to fall for a man. If she did, her dream of teaching would be over. "Teacher, can I take a break?" "I'm thirsty," called Tamara from outfield. "Let's all take a 5-minute break," Beth said, regaining her composure. "What's the score?" 7-3, John announced. "All right then. 5 minutes to go get a drink. Then we'll continue," she said. She looked over her shoulder and was relieved that Timothy was not in sight. The children ran off. Except Penny. She slipped her hand in Beth's, and together they walked toward the wide porch of the big house. It was easy to tell where the kitchen was by the stream of laughter and chatter pouring forth. Beth poked her head inside and saw the women bustling about, washing jars, hulling peaches, and measuring sugar into the pots of boiling syrup. "Why, Beth," Wilma exclaimed. "Come meet everyone." All the women paused what they were doing to look at her. Beth felt as scrutinized as if she'd appeared in public with her hair let down. "Hello," she said. Some of the women she already knew. They'd come to the schoolhouse. But others were strangers. They nodded at her, and one of the younger women with deep auburn hair stepped forward. "We're mighty glad to have you," she said. "My name is Sarah." Beth exhaled. The woman's kind tone and welcome warmed her heart. She knew instinctively that Sarah was going to be a good friend. The other women chimed in with their welcomes and their names. Beth got dizzy trying to keep them straight. At least, she had the children's names learned, which was more important. "Seems you have a mighty fine game of kickball going out there," one of the women said. "Yes, we do." The children were thirsty. "We'll get back at it in a minute." "We sent them around back to the hose," a stout woman with piercing black eyes commented. Then she chuckled, and her stomach rippled beneath her apron. "They'll be getting themselves wet, I'm thinking." "Won't hurt 'em a bit," said another. It's gonna be a scorcher today. You always think it's a scorcher, interjected a gray-haired woman. And it always is, came the reply. The women all laughed. Beth wondered if they'd rather she help them with the canning. Wilma had suggested she entertain the children, but she knew that the older girls usually did that at a frolic. Do you need my help? She asked. The stout woman waved her hand. Lance sake, child. You're helping by keeping the children happy out there. You go on, now. We'll visit more during the noon meal. Beth grinned, glad to be given the go-ahead to stay with the children. She didn't mind canning, she'd done it plenty. But she'd much rather be with the children. As she left the house, she noted two teenage girls watching a parcel of young children, most of them crawling over the quilts they'd set out on one corner of the porch. She spotted Benny right away. Beth decided that the child looked just like his father. He had the same blue eyes and the same sandy-colored hair. The boy grinned and stuck 2 fingers in his mouth, sucking eagerly. Beth wondered if his smile was like his father's. She realized that she hadn't seen Timothy smile. Well, perhaps a perfunctory smile. But not a real one. Not one that reached his eyes. Disgusted that her mind had traveled down that path again, Beth hurried back to the tree and the children. Most of them had returned now, and just as the woman had predicted, they were quite wet. Much more so than getting a drink merited. All right, children, let's continue. Beth reorganized everyone, and the game went on. 2 more innings saw many of the younger children growing restless. Beth decided that a change of activities wouldn't go amiss. Shall we begin some relay races? She suggested when the teams changed spots. But what about this game? Sam asked. Okay. Let's have your team up one more time to make it even. Then we'll have the races. That satisfied Sam and the other boys, who also looked a bit disgruntled. It took only 5 minutes for 3 outs. Beth was secretly glad it was fast. She was losing the involvement of some of the children, which was the last thing she wanted. Can I be the first one in my group? Becky asked after being put in line for the first race. Of course, Becky. You can be first. Get everyone on your team organized, won't you? Becky gave Beth a huge grin and promptly began placing the children behind her. When all 3 teams were ready, Beth put John in charge of starting the race and making the final declaration of the winners. Beth, came a voice behind her. Beth turned to see an older woman with a plump face and rosy cheeks standing there. Yes. Might I have a minute or two? She asked. Of course, Beth responded, stepping away from the race. John, you're in charge now, she added. John smiled, his cheeks creasing in dimples. Okay, teacher. I'll be in charge. Beth and the woman walked to the side of the yard. I'm Deborah Plank, the woman said. Plank? Was this Timothy's mother? Glad to meet you, Beth said. I wanted to know if you were aware what happened 2 years ago. She glanced around Beth to where the children were racing. She lowered her voice, and Beth had to lean close to hear her. Timothy is my son. I care for little Benny for him. The girls, too, when they're not in school. Beth nodded. She was mortified to feel a sudden urge to weep. Them girls had their hearts mighty broken. The Lord God has watched over them, but they still have sore hearts every now and again. I'm sure they do. Losing their mother had to be so painful. Deborah nodded, rocking back and forth on her feet. For all of us. She gave Beth a sharp look. It's been long enough to move on, but I don't think we're ready. Timothy, neither. Beth nodded again, wondering why Deborah felt it necessary to tell her about Timothy's grief. The children's, of course. But Timothy's? His dad has urged him to get on with his life, but he seems stuck. We've implored the Lord God on his behalf. Again, an intense look. We're glad you're here. My husband and I were talking about it. We're glad you're here. Beth's forehead creased. She couldn't understand exactly what Deborah was saying. Were they glad for the girl's sake? Or for Timothy's? Beth's face went hot as she realized the implications. Was Deborah trying to steer her in the direction of her son? Or ward her off? Deborah reached out and gave her hand a squeeze. We'd like to have you over for supper one evening, she said. The girls would like that very much. Do they live with you? Timothy and the children live in the grandpa house. He moved in with them after his wife's death. Beth's eyes misted over, and she blinked rapidly to hide it. Thank you for the invitation. That would be nice, she said, her voice soft. We'll count on it then. I'll be in touch with what evening works best. Deborah gave her a wide smile and promptly walked back to the big house. Beth watched her go, noting her purposeful stride and the gentle sway of her body as she went. Deborah was a bit on the stout side, but she moved with the grace and ease of a young girl. Beth drew in a long breath. So, dinner at the Planks. She didn't know how she felt about the invitation. Certainly, she'd be glad to get to know two of her students better. But the truth be told, she felt excitement building to get to know Timothy better, too. Which, of course, was the problem. She didn't want to get to know him better. For deep in her heart, she knew what that would mean. And she wanted to teach. Yes. She wanted to teach. She turned back to the laughing, yelling children. They were ready for a new race. Chapter 4. The first day of school dawned. Beth was up, bathed, and dressed way too early. She packed and repacked her satchel of papers. She'd made an attendance sheet, a seating chart, and she'd studied and restudied all the lessons. She had chosen the Bible reading to begin the day. Her stomach hurt. From nerves or excitement or both, she didn't know. All she knew was that she was petrified. What if she was no good? What if the children hated her? What if the school board disapproved of the way she taught? She'd assured the board that she didn't need to be an assistant first, something she now regretted. She'd been vain to conclude that she didn't need that training. What had she been thinking? Vanity. 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 She closed her eyes and sent up a prayer for forgiveness. She paced from one window to the other of her grandpa house, checking the sky to be sure it didn't look like rain. How would they play outside for recess if it rained? She'd forgotten to check for board games. Where was her head? She should have thoroughly checked that last cupboard when she'd been there the day before. What if someone had gone into the schoolhouse and erased all her lessons printed so painstakingly on the chalkboard? Wilma would expect her to eat a big breakfast that morning, and Beth didn't think she'd be able to manage even one bite. Her stomach was in full revolt now, growling and twisting and downright churning. What if she needed to use the outhouse in the middle of class? Was she to just rush out and leave the children alone? Beth plopped down in her rocking chair and groaned. She was totally unprepared for the day. There was a knock on the door. Teacher? Ma'am said to tell you breakfast was ready. Becky called through the screen door. Beth jumped up and went to the door. Thank you, Becky. I'm ready. The two hurried to the big house and through the side door. The smell of eggs and bacon and biscuits met them. Beth inhaled the comforting aroma. She might be able to get some food down after all. Becky led her to the table where the rest of the family was already assembled. Big day, Mr. Miller said. The 4 children attending school all giggled. Even Sam looked pleased. "Now, you see that you mind your teacher," Wilma instructed. She looked at Beth and grinned. "Sam will be one of my most trusted helpers," Beth commented. Sam's cheeks grew red and he gazed down at his plate. "Shall we say the silent blessing?" Mr. Miller said. He bowed his head and everyone followed suit. Beth thanked God for the food and asked for his special blessing on the school children. She asked for mercy and grace on her teaching. Mr. Miller coughed slightly, indicating that the prayer was over, and everyone dished up their plates. Beth managed to nibble on her biscuit and get a bit of eggs down. She didn't try the bacon, fearing the grease would settle in her stomach like a brick. Before anyone else was finished, she asked to be excused. She rose and thanked Wilma. "I best be getting to the schoolhouse," she said. "I don't want any of my students to beat me there." "No fear of that," Wilma said, glancing at the large grandfather clock in the corner. "I suspect most of them are still eating or doing morning chores." Beth laughed. "Yes, I suppose I am a bit early, but I'll feel better if I'm there." "Go on with you," Mr. Miller said, waving his hand to the side. "You have a nice day, you hear?" Beth smiled at him. "Thank you, Ephraim. I'm sure I will." And with that, she hurried back to the grandpa house to brush her teeth and be on her way. Beth stood before her students, her smile firmly in place. She scanned the children's upturned faces, their eyes filled with expectation. "Good morning, students. As you can see, I placed name tags on your desks, and I see you have all found your places. As most of you know, my name is Beth Fisher, and I'm very, very happy to be your new teacher." Becky was beaming at her, and Beth silently thanked the dear child. We will begin our mornings with a reading from the Bible. Today, I have chosen the 103rd Psalm for us. Beth proceeded to read the chapter, and then she asked the students to stand for the Lord's Prayer. By the time that was over, Beth's nerves had settled down to a quiet roar. We shall now sing 3 songs from our songbook. Becky, you may choose the first song. Becky wiggled in her seat and flipped through the songbook with an air of importance. She made her selection, and the children joined in to sing. Beth was surprised at the richness of the sound. Often when children sang, their high-pitched voices sounded thin and wavering. That was hardly the case with this group of children. After the 3rd song, Beth clapped her hands together. "Oh, children. That was wonderful. I can see that you've spent a lot of time singing together. Please be seated. The children's Saturday now, grades 3 through 8, your mathematics assignment is on the board. I would like the 1st and 2nd graders to please join me at the front table for phonics and vocabulary." The younger students walked obediently to the table and were seated. Both of Timothy's girls, Frances and Missy, were part of the group. Beth noted their scrubbed faces and neatly pressed dresses. She thought of their grandmother, Deborah. She envisioned the woman standing over an iron with her flushed red cheeks, making sure her granddaughter's dresses looked perfect for the first day of school. "Grandma said you was coming for supper one day," Missy volunteered. "Yes. I've been invited," Beth said. "When?" Missy asked. "I don't rightly know," Beth said. She reached out and squeezed the young girl's hand. "Now, children, I am going to assign a workbook to each of you. This will be your book for the year. I want you to take good care of it." She handed out the thick workbooks, and the children opened them with looks of awe. "Once I get to know you better, you 2nd graders will be assigned a 1st grader. You will be their helper when I am working with the older grades. Now, won't that be fun?" The children gave her dubious looks. Except Frances. She seemed downright pleased. "Can my sister be my helper?" she asked. "That is possible. Give me a few days to decide, won't you?" Frances nodded, her gray eyes huge. The morning whizzed by. Beth was on her feet almost continually, checking with each grade, giving instructions and guidance, and answering questions between assignments. During lunch, they all ate happily and burst from the schoolhouse for recess. The older children promptly got a game of baseball started, while the little ones played tag. Beth stood under a tree and watched them run and laugh. A sense of complete contentment filled her until she found herself erupting into a glorious smile. So far, she absolutely loved teaching. She'd been right. She was born for this. When the school day was nearly over, more than one mother came early to fetch her children. They sat in the back of the schoolhouse, babies draped over their knees. A few of the tiniest babies fussed and cried a bit, but Beth continued as if nothing was amiss. Buggies dotted the yard out front. Some of her youngest students turned about, craning their necks to smile at their mothers. After the goodbye song was sung, Beth dismissed the children, and they wandered back to their mothers. Some of the children walked to school, so they promptly made their way outside after giving her a wave. All in all, a successful day. Beth breathed deeply and walked back to meet the mothers who still hung about. "How was my Tamara, teacher?" Beth laughed. "Why, she was just fine. She worked hard today. I look forward to seeing her again in the morning." Tamara's mother nodded with a satisfied smile. "That you will. Say goodbye, then." She nudged her daughter's shoulder. "Goodbye, Beth." "Goodbye, Tamara. See you tomorrow." Deborah Plank was there, holding Benny. Missy and Frances stood on either side of her. "How were the girls?" Deborah asked. Beth smiled down at both of them. "Why, they were wonderful. We had a very good day." "I'm learning to read," Frances announced. "It ain't so hard." "I might be her helper," offered Missy. Deborah chuckled at the girls. "Here. Take your brother outside, will you? I want a word with the teacher." Missy cast an adoring look at Beth and took Benny's hand. Frances took her brother's other hand, and they went outside. Beth's heart stung with the yearning she saw in Missy's eyes. The child was so dear and had already attached to her like glue. "About that supper," Deborah said. "Why not come home with the girls tomorrow after school? Would that suit?" Beth was mildly surprised, not expecting the invitation quite so soon. But there was really no reason to turn it down. "That sounds right nice," she responded. Deborah grinned. "Well, then. That's settled. The girls will walk you over." She ran her hands over her dress and nodded again, looking well pleased. Beth followed her to the door. She stood on the top step and watched Deborah go down to meet her grandchildren. As they walked away, Missy looked back over her shoulder and gave Beth another huge smile. Beth raised her hand and waved. Such a dear, dear girl. Both of them, really. Considering how exhausted she was, Beth should have slept deeply and well. But she didn't. Her mind whirled with ideas for the next day, things she could tweak, a different game she could suggest at recess. Her students' smiling faces spun in her mind as she attempted to get some sleep. Finally, during the wee hours of the morning, she fell asleep, only to be awakened a few hours later by the screeching rooster who couldn't seem to tell time. She threw back her light quilt and got up. No reason to lie in bed any longer when she could be studying the 8th grade math a bit more. Math wasn't her favorite subject, she being more of a reading girl. But she was determined to like it. Otherwise, the students might sense her reluctance, and she couldn't have that. She took a quick shower and dressed, taking extra care with her hair. She put in a few additional bobby pins to make sure her cap set just right. Now that she had gone over her day in her mind a million times, She couldn't help but focus on the supper invitation. It would be lovely to dine with her students and to meet their grandfather. She paused with her hand hovering over her hair. Who was she trying to fool? It was Timothy she really wanted to see. She wanted to hear his voice again, and see his half-smile as he studied her face. She wanted to watch him with the children. She dropped her hand to her side and stepped back and leaned against the wall. No. No, no, no. She couldn't be so interested in him. She simply couldn't. Besides, becoming so interested in someone without even knowing him was absurd. Beyond absurd. She bent down to tie her thick-soled black shoes. Enough of that. She wasn't going to give it another thought. And upon her arrival at the Planks that afternoon, she would be courteous to Timothy, nothing more. She would put her attention solely on the children. When she went to the big house for breakfast, Wilma met her at the side door, holding out an envelope. "Oh, forgive me, Beth. This came for you yesterday, and I plumb forgot about it." Beth saw the familiar hand of her sister Mellie. She smiled and took the envelope. "No harm done. Breakfast is running about 5 minutes late if you'd like to give it a read." Beth nodded and slipped back out of the house. She returned to the grandpa house and sank down into the rocking chair on the porch. Ah, sweet Mellie. Writing so soon? How lovely of her. Beth ripped the envelope open and began to read. "Dearest Beth, I have been thinking about you during these days since you left. By now, school has started for you. How do you like it? Is it as you hoped? We miss you around here. Especially me, if I dare say. Faith has been helping me in my sweet shop this past week. I've been unusually busy, so her help is much appreciated. Ruthie has been quite testy since you left. She reminds me constantly of your absence and pushes more and more chores onto me. I keep telling her that I must be at the shop all day long, but it doesn't seem to register. I fear being too critical of her, but I'm sure you understand my frustration." Beth paused in her reading and sighed. Ruthie was a snapping turtle much of the time. Beth still couldn't understand what her brother had been thinking when he courted her. Although, if she remembered correctly, Ruthie had been a nicer girl then. Poor Mellie. To be on the other end of Ruthie's tongue-lashing wasn't pleasant. "I finally had the courage to urge Ma'am to see an English doctor for her rheumatoid arthritis again. She was miffed with me and clamped her lips shut. She wouldn't speak to me the rest of the day. But I had to do it, Beth. I felt compelled, and truth be known, I think God would approve of her going. She's doing well, living with Grandpa in the Grandpa house. Faith goes back there many times a day to check on her. I hope you won't be upset, but I wanted to tell you about Caleb." Beth sucked in her breath and kept reading. "Before you left, after you broke things off with him, you told me that he was sweet on me. I don't think you were quite right. He seems a bit lost without you. He does come around the shop from time to time. More times than necessary, if the truth be known. But he asks after you. Wanting to know how you're doing. Please write, Beth, and let us know. We're all thinking of you." Beth pressed the letter to her chest. She still felt certain that Caleb would fall in love with Mellie if given the chance. Coming around and asking about her was just an excuse. At least, she hoped so. Caleb was a fine young man, and it had hurt her to disappoint him. But she felt good about setting him free for Mellie's sake. How her sister must have suffered, watching the man she loved court her sister. Beth shuddered and read on. "Things have been mighty busy with the harvest. We still have some major canning to do. The tomatoes are still producing as usual. No harsh frost yet to stop them. I imagine Ruthie will be chomping at the bit to get more canning done today. I'll have to stand firm and go out to the shop. Seems to be an awful lot of tourists around right now. They love to come in and browse, staring at me when they think I'm not looking. It's amusing, really. I might as well sit on the shelf myself and display my plain clothes and head covering. Then they could stare to their heart's content. Oh. The things I say. But you understand, Beth. Still, I'm awful glad for the tourists. It's nice to meet them, and they buy heavily. I best be getting back to my work. Right? Let me know how things are going. Everyone sends their love. Our Eli is wondering if you'll make it home for his wedding come November. Surely, the school board will allow you to come. Love, your sister, Mellie. Beth folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. She leaned into the chair and smiled. How lovely to hear from home. Her mind had been so consumed since she arrived in Meadow Lark that she'd hardly thought of her family. She was a bit chagrined to realize it. But now, after reading Mellie's letter, a surge of homesickness filled her. She would like to be able to help with the canning. And to help Mellie in her store. She'd always enjoyed that. Mellie was a natural at it, greeting the customers so warmly and putting them right at ease. Her baking was good, too. More than good. She went inside the grandpa house and laid the letter on the table. She'd write Mellie that night. After her dinner with the planks. Her breath caught. It was going to be a fine day. And in only 9 or so hours, she'd be sitting at the table with Timothy. She inhaled sharply and corrected herself. She'd be sitting at the table with 2 of her students, and little Benny, of course. Beth's second day of teaching went even more smoothly than the first. The students seemed much more relaxed, as if Beth had been their teacher for years. She couldn't help but put special attention on Missy and Frances. The girls beamed at her nearly all day long. When the last song was sung, they rushed up to her. You coming with us, now? Frances asked. She gave Beth a big smile, and Beth saw that one of her lower teeth had fallen out. Why, Frances Plank. You have a window in your mouth. Frances gave her a puzzled look. Beth took her chin firmly in hand. Now, smile for me again. Frances complied. See? Right there on the bottom. You have a window. Missy giggled. She means your tooth is gone, she explained. Frances giggled, too. Fell out last night, teacher. I must say. You're growing up into a fine young lady. Why, only the big kids start losing their teeth. Frances gazed up at Beth with such a loving expression that Beth's throat tightened. What a beautiful girl this Frances was. Her heart nearly ached with it. Can we go now? You ready? Missy asked. Just a moment. Would you girls like to wipe down the chalkboard for me? They both nodded and ran for the rags. While they swiped the board, Beth grabbed the broom and began sweeping the room. She'd need to get a job roster organized soon. The teacher and students were expected to keep the room spotless. Beth eyed the waste basket. John hadn't left yet, so she asked him to empty it, which he promptly did. The girls couldn't reach the upper corners of the board, so Missy dragged a chair over. Frances climbed up and stretched high on her tippy toes to get every last mark erased. I need to write tomorrow's math assignments on the board. Can you wait another few minutes? Beth asked them. Yes, Missy said. What else do you want us to do? Why don't you straighten the rows of desks while you wait? The girls got busy, and Beth opened her lesson book to the next day. It didn't take long to write the assignments, and before she knew it, she was walking down the road with a little girl on each side of her. They'd both taken her hand, and Beth found that she liked holding hands with them. Mostly, she'd only held hands with Mellie, and that was when they were young. Caleb used to grab her hand sometimes, but not often. Chapter 5. The Planks lived about a half-mile from the school. As they walked up their drive, Beth admired the flower beds bordering the front porch. They were thick with flowers. Yet there was an order to it that was pleasing to behold. Evidently Deborah Plank was an accomplished gardener. She looked up to see Deborah on the front porch, waiting for them. "Grandma!" Frances cried, letting go of Beth's hand and rushing to her grandmother. "Welcome home, our Frances," Deborah said, with a welcoming hug. Missy continued to hold Beth's hand, leading her up the steps. Deborah smiled at them. "Welcome, Beth. Why not sit out here a spell and have some lemonade?" "That sounds right nice," Beth agreed. She sank into one of the white rockers. "Girls, go wash up, and I'll bring you a glass, too." "Where's Dad?" Missy asked. "I want to tell him Beth is here. He's out in the barn with your grandpa. He should be in soon. Can I run tell him?" Deborah opened the screen door. "Wash up first. Then you can go tell him if you must." But Missy didn't need to inform her father of Beth's presence. As soon as the children and Deborah disappeared into the house, Timothy came walking across the yard toward the porch. Beth's heart did a quick flip, and she swallowed hard, working to remain calm. She watched his easy gait and saw his smile grow as he neared. "Beth," he said. There was a melodic sound to his voice. "Good afternoon, Timothy." He was downright grinning now. A beautiful smile. And it most definitely reached his eyes. He took off his straw hat and slapped it against his leg as if removing dust. "Glad to see you made it." "Yes. I made it. Your girls saw to that." She smiled back at him, wondering if her face was flushed. "Where's Ma'am?" "Pouring me some lemonade. The girls are washing up." "Good. That's good." He climbed the stairs slowly, and Beth found herself becoming more flustered with each of his steps. Again, she was struck by the shining blue of his eyes. They seemed to catch her and hold her, even as she tried to look away. How were the girls? In school, I mean. They were wonderful. They're good girls, Timothy. Beth had no idea why her face grew so hot as she said his name. That they are. He sat in the rocking chair beside her, and his gaze rested on her. "I'm happy you came for supper." The girls could talk of little else. Beth nodded, gripping the arms of the chair. She wanted to bolt, which made no sense at all. "It's right nice to have been invited," she managed to utter. Timothy laid his hat on his knee and rocked gently. He looked out over the property with a satisfied expression. "Do your folks farm?" Beth nodded. "My brothers do. Dad passed away." "I'm sorry to hear that." His eyes were soft on hers. "And my sister Mellie has a sweet shop." He cocked his eyebrow at that. "Does she now?" Beth frowned, suddenly wary. Was he being critical? "She does well. It's a big help to the family." A bit of censure had crept into her voice, and she was ashamed. His eyebrow rose even higher. He was quiet for a moment, studying her. She folded her hands in her lap and felt like a fool. He would think she was starting an argument with him. Finally, he spoke. "I think that's real nice. I'd like to taste some of her goods sometime." Beth's shoulders relaxed. He hadn't been judging her sister. Some Amish did judge her. They didn't like Mellie catering to the English, interacting with them all the time. She'd mistakenly thought Timothy was going to do the same. Or perhaps, she had hoped he would. Then she'd have a reason to dislike him. She shuddered. What was wrong with her? Such a line of thinking wasn't seemly. Not in the least. The girls shoved on the screen door and tumbled outside. "Dad!" Missy cried. "Beth is here." Timothy chuckled. "I can see that, Missy." Francis went to stand by his knee. "I was good in school, Dad." Timothy put his hand on her shoulder. "I never doubted that for a minute, Francis." Deborah came out with glasses of lemonade. "Oh, Tim, I didn't know you were here. I'll go get you a glass." "Is your dad coming in soon?" "No. He told me he'd be another 40 minutes or so." Each of the girls took a small glass of lemonade. Deborah handed Beth a large one, with chunks of ice clinking against the glass. "You want mine?" Missy offered Timothy. "No, you go ahead and enjoy. Ma'am will bring me one." The girls settled down on the top step. Beth took a sip of lemonade and found the light sweetening simply perfect. She took another drink. "Can we show Beth the baby goats?" Francis asked. "They're called kids," Missy corrected her. At that moment, Benny pushed through the screen door. He went immediately to Timothy, who pulled him onto his lap. "Hello, our Benny. How are you?" Timothy gave him a quick hug. Beth saw the look of tenderness in Timothy's eyes as he snuggled his son. Again, she noted the resemblance of the boy to his father. She wondered if the girls took more after their mother. "Here you are," Deborah said, emerging with another tall glass of lemonade. She gave it to Timothy, who promptly took a long drink. "It's delicious, ma'am." "Thank you. Supper will be ready in under an hour. Now, Timothy, make sure your dad gets in here on time, would you?" She clucked her tongue and shook her head, but there was an amused twinkle in her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. Don't you fret. Can we show her, Dad? You never said." Frances set her empty glass down on the porch and jumped up. "Come on." Beth took another sip and then set her glass on a small circular table. She stood. "I'd love to see your baby goats." "They're kids," repeated Missy. "Missy Plank, you don't correct your teacher," Timothy admonished. Beth laughed. "But she's right. Take me to your kids, then, Missy." Missy and Frances each grabbed one of her hands and pulled her down the stairs. Secretly, Beth was glad to leave the porch. She needed a moment to steel herself against Timothy's appeal. But her relief was short-lived. "Come on, Dad," yelled Frances over her shoulder. Timothy stood, still holding Benny, and caught up with them easily. Beth was painfully aware of his presence beside her as they walked. The girls chattered happily and ran ahead. Beth, try as she might, couldn't concentrate on their words. On an uneven patch of ground, she wobbled slightly, and Timothy's shoulder grazed hers. It was as if a bolt of lightning shot through her. She was so stunned, she nearly stopped to grab her shoulder. Instead, she blinked rapidly and increased her pace, catching up to the girls. What was it about that man that disturbed her so? Her former beau Caleb had never had such an effect on her. Caleb was handsome, too. More so than Timothy. And since she didn't even know Timothy, it couldn't be his personality that gave her the jitters. Red flags of warning flashed through her mind, and she forced herself to concentrate on the girls. Supper was excruciating. Beth found herself glancing repeatedly at the wall clock, willing the meal to be over. Timothy's frequent stares did nothing to help the situation. Thank goodness for the children. And their grandpa. Mr. Miller Sr. was a jolly man who enjoyed playful teasing, somewhat unusual for the head of a household. More than once, Beth glued her eyes to him, pretending Timothy didn't exist. After Deborah served delicious slices of shoofly pie, Beth cleared her throat. This was wonderful. Thank you so much, Deborah. It was kind of you to invite me over. But the hour is late. I should be getting back. Deborah nodded. Yes. Almost time for the children to wash up and turn in for the night. Girls, get ready for Bible reading and prayer. She looked at Beth. Would you like to stay? Beth was caught off guard. She most certainly wasn't close enough to them to stay for their prayer time. In truth, she was flabbergasted to have been asked. She licked her lips. Again, how kind. But I really need to be going. Timothy will see you home. Was there no end to the woman's surprising comments? She couldn't be seen alone with Timothy. What would the people think? Timothy must have noted her hesitation, because he quickly said, I'll hitch up the closed buggy, and you'll be home in a jiff. Closed buggy. Beth breathed again. Thank you. That's kind. I can walk, though. It's not far at all. Nevertheless, Tim can take you. Mr. Plank rose. That he can. Now, off with the both of you. Beth made her way to the front door, but not before Timothy got there and held it open for her. She walked out onto the porch, and he followed. I'm sorry about that, he murmured as they both headed toward the barn. Beth shrugged. It's all right. Ma'am has been upset for months now. Oh. She thinks I should have already remarried. His voice was low. Beth listened carefully to his tone, wondering how he felt about the whole situation. I'm sure she just wants you happy, she said and cringed. Why was she talking about his happiness? Honestly, the things that came to her head and popped out of her mouth when she was with him. Wait for me here, he said. I won't be a minute. She leaned against the side of the barn, half wishing she was walking home and half glad she had these extra moments with him. He came out of the barn, leading a young mare. Within minutes, he'd hitched her to the enclosed buggy at the side of the barn. He gestured for her to join him and opened the door for her. She climbed inside, realizing the last time she was in a closed buggy was when Caleb was courting her. They'd taken the long way home from the youth singing, going by way of Edmund's Pond. During their last ride, she'd been giddy, making silly comments, all the while dreading what she had to do. But she'd put it off until she couldn't hold out any longer. She shivered and shook her head to clear the memory. That was over. Timothy climbed in beside her and picked up the reins. Won't take but a moment to get you home. I could have walked. You could have. He paused and turned to look her full in the face. But then we wouldn't have this time together, would we? Her eyes widened, and her lips parted. Why, he was just as forward as his mother. She wouldn't have thought so. Oh, Beth, he said with a chuckle. You must forgive me. I've been listening to my mother's prattling for too long. With that, he slapped the reins on the horse's back, and they took off out of the drive and down the road. In less than 10 minutes, he was approaching the miller's house. He pulled up slightly on the reins, and the horse slowed to barely a walk. Ready? She looked at him, puzzled. Ready for what? Are you ready to go home or would you like a further view of Meadow Lark? It's a lovely district, and I imagine you've only seen a tiny bit of it since arriving. That was true enough. But what was he suggesting? That they ride around together while the evening grew late? There's school tomorrow, she said, trying to squelch her sudden desire to ride with him down every single road in the county. You're right. So, you'd rather I let you off here? She was grateful that he didn't suggest driving her right onto the property. Folks might get the wrong idea that they were courting or something. It surely wasn't usual for her to be with a man alone who wasn't her relative. She bit her lip and had a hasty argument with herself. After a moment's hesitation, she blurted, "I wouldn't mind seeing a bit more of the area." His smile broadened, and he looked at her with the same excitement she saw on the faces of her students when she announced playtime. She bit back a grin and settled more comfortably on the seat. "Tell me more about your family," he said. She glanced at him and then focused her attention through the front opening of the buggy. "My dad passed away 3 years ago. We still miss him. Mam suffers from arthritis. Old maize herbs and such aren't having much of an effect. Like I told you, my sister Mellie has a sweet shop. I have another sister, Faith, and 3 brothers. My eldest brother and his family recently moved in with us." She took a breath, shocked at how much she spilled out in only a few seconds. She couldn't believe she'd been so free with her tongue. What kind of persuasive power did Timothy Plank have over her? There she was, riding around with him in a closed buggy on a school night, telling him all about her family, and wishing that the night would stretch on for hours. Timothy looked at her and nodded. "And you? What do you like to do?" She gripped her hands in her lap. "I love to teach. And read. And study." His eyes didn't leave her face. She saw something in them she couldn't identify. What was he thinking? Then he surprised her by chuckling, his deep voice filling the buggy. "Your eyes light up when you talk about teaching. Did you know that?" She blinked. "Do they?" "Yes, that they do. You must truly love it." "I do." He turned his attention back to the road, and she observed his profile. He was different than other men. She'd expected him to wax on about the importance of a woman's place in the home, raising the children, and attending to all the normal duties of a wife. Instead, he'd laughed, enjoying her excitement over teaching. The man intrigued her. No. More than intrigued her. He enchanted her. Enchanted? Her hand flew to her mouth. What kind of word was that to be using? "What is it?" he asked. "What's wrong?" Her throat tightened, and she swallowed hard. "Beth." "Nothing," she said quickly. "I'm sorry. Will you take me home now?" Everything in her wanted to bolt from the buggy that very moment and flee. She could barely keep herself on the seat. He gave her a quizzical look and turned the buggy around in a wide spot on the road. "Of course," he said, all animation gone from his voice. "You'll be home shortly." Neither of them spoke for the rest of the ride. Beth kept her face averted. She stared blindly out the tiny side opening, seeing nothing. Home. Home. Get home. She forced her mind to her first teaching tasks of the next day. Of course, the math assignments were printed on the chalkboard. She'd chosen which Bible chapter to read, and she'd told little Sharon that she could choose the opening songs from the songbook. All was in order and ready. Except her. She'd never felt so not in order or ready in her life. Timothy stopped the buggy at the end of the Miller's Drive. "Here you are," he said. His voice was low, and she heard the multitude of questions in it. He made no move to get out. He wouldn't want anyone to see him as he dropped her off. He would know she wanted his presence hidden. He did lean over her, however, to open the door for her. His arm brushed against her, and she jerked back against the seat, trying to get out of his way. He froze, and he gazed at her, his face so close that she felt his breath on her cheeks. His eyes searched hers and then rested on her mouth. Her breath caught in her throat, and she stopped breathing. The very air thickened, and she couldn't move. His lips opened, and he frowned, still staring into her eyes. And then he blinked, and she saw him swallow with effort. "Thank you for letting me take you home," he rasped. He shoved the door open and then retreated back to his side of the buggy. She squirmed outside, her feet dropping to the dirt below. She faced him, and gave him one last almost desperate glance before turning on her heel and fleeing. The cool evening air brushed against her cheeks. She was halfway across the yard when she realized how ridiculous it would look if someone saw her racing to the grandpa house. She slowed to a walk, taking short, deliberate steps as if she were on a simple stroll at dusk. Completely normal. Completely innocent. But her walk to the grandpa house was anything but. Beth sat with her head bent over the third-grade primer. She listened to the children read aloud, one at a time. There were only 3 third-graders in the class, and all 3 of them read quite smoothly, sounding out the words with little difficulty. "That's right, nice," Beth said, as Letty finished her turn. "All of you children did well. I'm pleased. Now, when you go back to your seats, please finish pages 6 and 7 in your reading workbook." The children nodded and quietly returned to their seats. Beth stood and stretched. Folding her long legs under the low table at the side of the room gave her cramps if she didn't stand up and move about regularly. She glanced over the class. Every child's head was fixed over his or her work, and there wasn't a whisper among them. Beth glanced at Missy and Frances. Missy's forehead was wrinkled in concentration as she worked on her spelling. Beth wandered to her desk and squatted beside her. "How is it going, Missy?" Missy gave a start. "Oh, I didn't see you," she murmured. "You are concentrating mighty hard." "I'm proud of you," Beth said, giving a light touch to the little girl's shoulder. Missy grinned up at her with complete pleasure. "Thank you, Beth." Beth observed the girl's laborious efforts. "You're welcome. Don't be afraid to ask one of the older students if you need help when I'm busy." Missy nodded. Beth was ready to leave when Missy tugged on her sleeve. She squatted down close again. "I liked having you for supper," she whispered. Beth inclined her head toward her. "I liked it, too." "Will you come again right soon?" she asked. Beth glanced around, self-conscious. No one seemed to be paying them any mind. "I'd like that," she answered. She stood and quickly walked through the rest of the class, looking over their shoulders, checking their work. She wondered at her quick agreement to a possible additional invitation. It would be entirely better if when she went the next time, Timothy Plank wasn't there. Chapter 6. Dear Mellie, thank you for your letters. I was so happy to get them. It warms my heart to know how things are going back home. It is hard to believe that 2 months have already passed. Things are going well here. I feel as if I have lived here in this cozy little grandpa house forever. The Millers are good to me, and their children are charming. Even the older ones, who are no longer in school. Wilma, Mrs. Miller, includes me in everything as if I'm family. Yes. I will for sure make every effort to attend Eli's wedding. Has his engagement been published? I imagine it has. Although, I'm quite certain most people in the district had their strong suspicions already. How are things going with the rest of the family? I know a teacher isn't supposed to have favorite students, and truly, I love them all. But little Frances and Missy Plank are my very favorites. You should see little Frances's freckled nose. It turns up in a cute little point and scrunches up when she concentrates. Her big sister Missy works harder than any other students. She does write fine, too. Both girls like to stay after school and help me wash down the chalkboards. The rest of the cleaning is done by the children before they're dismissed. You remember? I've simply fashioned my teaching after the pattern of our schooling in Hollybrook. Timothy Plank often comes for the girls after school. Since the harvest has now been put to bed, he has more free time. I dare say, he comes at least 3 times a week. Sometimes, the 4 of them walk me home. Little Benny walks quite well now and can keep up. He looks adorable all bundled in his winter coat. Timothy dotes on him, and it's quite touching to watch. Timothy has a way of caring for people that strikes me as both unusual and strangely beautiful. Did I tell you that his wife passed away giving birth to Benny? The air has turned cooler now, and most all of us have dragged out our winter coverings. We've had many mornings with a hard frost. I imagine it's right cold there, too, since we're not really so far away from each other. Please tell me on which Tuesday the wedding will be. I'll talk with the school board about it. Hopefully, Deacon Knepp will be disposed to allow me to attend. I'd better close now. I need to study a bit more before morning. With love, your sister, Beth. Dear Beth, thank you for your letter. I'm so pleased that all is going well. Eli's wedding is to be held on November 30 /sup. It will be one of the first of the season. Ruthie is already fussing about it. But the main responsibility will fall with Jenny's family. The wedding will be there, of course. Oh, I do so hope you can come. Grandpa said that he'll arrange transport for you, so no worries there. Beth, tell me more about this Timothy Plank. You seem to mention him quite regularly. How I wish we could talk into the night like we used to do, sharing our secrets. Well, most of them, anyway. The letter went on, but Beth stopped reading. Had she really spoken so frequently of Timothy? With a groan, she realized she had. Now, Mellie would think she was in love with him, and she wasn't. Being in love would get in the way of her plans to teach for many years to come. She blanched and dropped her hands to her lap. A Bible verse from the book of Proverbs flashed into her mind. A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps. Was she so busy devising her own plans that she was not allowing the Lord to direct her steps? Her stomach soured at the thought, and she stood and walked to her front room window. She gazed outside onto the half-frozen land. The trees had shed their leaves, and the piles had been dutifully raked up by the Miller children. The tire swing hung empty, looking forlorn as it swayed ever so slightly in the wind. Beth heard Andrew holler something from the barn and saw Josh go racing across the yard to meet him. Finishing up their chores, no doubt. Supper would be served in less than an hour, and Beth should be early to help put it on the table. She'd help red up the kitchen afterwards, too, something she now did regularly. At first Mrs. Miller wouldn't hear of it, saying that Beth's room and board didn't include a passel of duties. But Beth didn't feel right about doing nothing. It was plain unnatural to not pitch in and help when there was work to be done. Beth held Mellie's letter to her chest. Was she acting vain and proud, making her own plans for her life? Wasn't that what fancy people did? She knew for a fact that the English took great pride in planning out their lives. She shivered and reached for her light cape, which hung on a peg by the door. She wrapped it around herself and went back to the rocker to finish reading Mellie's letter. It was preaching Sunday, and Beth was glad for it. She'd felt the need to hear a good sermon all week, ever since she'd experienced guilt over her own pride and vanity. So on that Sunday, she sat ramrod straight, her entire focus on Preacher Manny as he delivered his sermon. His was the first and shorter sermon. Beth's focus was so keen that she didn't notice Missy wiggle up beside her on the bench until Preacher Manny finished up. Before the bishop rose to speak, Missy tugged on her sleeve. Beth looked down, surprised to find the young girl there. She certainly hadn't been there in the beginning. She'd been with her grandmother, along with Francis and Benny. Beth had forced herself not to look at the men's section. She didn't want to see Timothy as her sister's words still burned through her mind. You seem to mention him quite frequently. But now, with Timothy's daughter smiling up at her, she couldn't help herself. She broke her gaze with Missy and glanced across the barn. It was easy to spot him. He was nearly a head taller than most men. For one horrifying moment, their eyes met and locked. Beth almost gasped out loud. Her face burned as she dropped her gaze to the floor. But he'd seen her look for him. How completely humiliating. For a split second, Beth felt like bursting into tears. She was shocked at herself. The emotions churning through her were a mess. She was a mess. What was wrong with her? And then the tears did come, filling her eyes. She wiped at them as inconspicuously as possible. It wouldn't do to have the schoolteacher weeping her way through the service. She blinked hard and forced herself back under control. Missy leaned slightly toward her, the edges of her cap brushing against Beth's arm. An overwhelming surge of love for the girl filled Beth, nearly taking her breath away. Beth squared her shoulders and stared fixedly ahead. The second sermon was now underway, and it would be long. Too long, in fact. For it would give her mind entirely too much time to wander. Something Beth didn't want. No, she didn't want that, not even a little. After the preaching was over, the women got busy with the food. The men rearranged the benches and pulled out the long tables, setting them up for the noon meal. There wasn't enough room to serve everyone at once, so they would eat in shifts. Beth decided to be in the last group to eat, along with a lot of the other womenfolk. Fact was, she wasn't hungry. Her stomach was in turmoil, and she was maddeningly aware of Timothy Plank's presence as he bustled about with the men, carrying tables and benches. The children ran around, some of them getting underfoot. A few words from their mothers, however, sorted them out quickly. Beth busied herself with putting pickles into serving bowls on each table. Then she helped arrange the cold cuts and placed loaves of sliced bread at both ends of each table. Deborah approached her as she worked. "Hello, Beth," she said, her voice exceedingly friendly. "Hello, Deborah. Did Frances tell you that she's got another loose tooth?" Beth smiled. "That she did. I imagine she'll be losing it any day. Her dad teases her that he's going to pull it." "Oh." "He wouldn't." Beth put her hands on her hips in mock horror. Deborah chuckled. "Oh, but he would. His dad used to pull his loose teeth out, and our Timothy does the same." Deborah stopped laughing and her face grew serious. "How are you, Beth?" Beth blinked in surprise. She had no idea why Deborah had grown so solemn all of a sudden. "I'm fine, Deborah. School is going right well." Deborah waved her hand through the air. "Oh, I know that. I'm wondering about you." Beth was nonplussed. It wasn't normal to have someone ask such a personal question, and she had no idea how to answer it. Finally, she said, "I'm fine." "Truly?" Deborah nodded slowly. "Timothy was mentioning that it would be nice to have you over for supper again. He said the girls would enjoy it." Beth hadn't been back to the Planks since that first week when school had started. Truth be known, she was surprised that she hadn't been asked. Although, down deep, she was relieved. She was wary of spending too much time with the family, afraid that she would grow even more affectionate toward the girls. And their father. "That's nice," she muttered, not knowing what else to say. "Perhaps in late November?" "Perhaps. But my brother is getting married, and I'm hoping to return home for the wedding. Of course, you need to be there. I'm sure the board will approve." She looked thoughtful for a moment. "You'll come back, won't you?" Beth flinched. "What?" "Of course. This conversation was becoming odder by the minute. You don't have a young man waiting for you? Beth stood very still. Her mind flew back to Caleb and his warm smile. Deborah clucked her tongue. Oh, what am I thinking? Asking such a private question. You'll have to forgive an old woman. Beth didn't respond, her mind was still fixed on Caleb. When she went back for Eli's wedding, Caleb would surely be in attendance. She wondered what their meeting would be like. Oh, how she hoped it would be pleasant, and how she hoped she would see evidence of his affection for her sister, Mellie. Before leaving Hollybrook, Beth had practically promised Mellie that Caleb would love her very soon. Beth chided herself. How had she been so naive as to think that she could control or predict someone's affection? Her eyes clouded over. There was no way she could have predicted her own affection toward Timothy Plank. Truth was, she would have adamantly denied any possibility of it whatsoever. Beth. Beth gave a start and gazed into Deborah's concerned face. You all right? Yes. Yes, of course. Beth gave an awkward chuckle. My Timothy seems quite fond of you, Deborah said, and Beth could see that she was trying to act nonchalant about it. But frankly, their conversation had raced past nonchalant from the first word. He's a good father, Beth said, knowing such a comment was safe. And right then, she craved for safety and the end of this interchange. Please excuse me, Deborah. I think I should check in with Wilma to see if there is anything else I can do to help. Supper then? In a few weeks. I'll give the girls the details, Deborah called after her. Beth walked quickly to the barn door, zooming right past Wilma and the girls. She burst out into the crisp air, breathing deeply. She liked Deborah. She did. But she didn't like being under such scrutiny. Why, even Mellie stopped before that level of badgering. Or had it been badgering? Perhaps she just took it that way because of her own feelings. She darted between rows of buggies and then leaned against one of the sturdy black conveyances. Deborah was playing matchmaker, pure and simple. Beth knew of Amish matchmakers, though she had never met one personally. And she didn't think Deborah was a matchmaker in general. Just a matchmaker for her son. Timothy. Even the mere thought of his name made her heart rate increase. She clenched her hands and squeezed her eyes shut. Did she love him? Was that what it was? Love? She wanted to burst into tears. She couldn't love him. She just couldn't. She sniffed and squared her shoulders. This wouldn't be a problem. She would simply do the same thing she'd done with Caleb. She'd spurn Timothy's attention and make it clear that teaching was her purpose in life. Beth. Beth spun on her heel. Timothy. What was he doing out there? I was worried. I saw you talking to Ma'am, and then you rushed out. He took a step closer and his clear blue eyes were intense on hers. Did she upset you? Beth swallowed hard. She wanted to be calm. She wanted to be aloof. But his eyes had grabbed her and drawn her in. She couldn't have averted her gaze if she'd tried. Hardly aware of her own actions, she leaned toward him. His eyes searched her face now, resting on the gentle curve of her lips. She felt beads of perspiration dot her upper lip, and she knew her cheeks had gone crimson. Now, she thought. Now was the time to be cool and disinterested. Now was the time to make it clear that she was unavailable. I was worried, he repeated, his voice a caress. He didn't touch her. He didn't make any move to draw closer, but he was there. His presence filled her, surrounded her until she couldn't breathe. I am fine, she stammered, her voice low and strained. He tilted his head and a slow smile spread across his face. I'm glad, he whispered. Ma'am, well, sometimes, she can be a bit overbearing. Keep talking, she urged him silently. Talk about anything. I don't care. Just keep talking so I don't have to. All I need is a minute to regain my bearings. Just 1 minute. Beth didn't get that minute. He bent down slightly, narrowing the distance between them. Would you go riding with me this Saturday? I'll be waiting for you at Rounder Bridge. If you're interested. She moistened her lips, working to stifle the yearning that flamed within her. It thundered through her, and she began to nod, to agree to be with him, to allow herself to feel him beside her, to listen to him, to laugh with him. And then she stiffened. Her resolve reared up within her, and she looked at him, her eyes going cold. No. Thank you, but no. His face went white, and he flinched as if she'd slapped him. He swallowed and backed away, but his disappointment, his sadness reached out and flooded her. But she wouldn't be swallowed up in it. Swallowed up in him. She turned on her heel and fled. It was done. Chapter 7. Weddings were joyful celebrations, and Eli's was no different. When Beth arrived back home to Hollybrook in the van, Mellie and Faith nearly bowled her over with their greeting. You're here! Mellie cried, her voice full of emotion. Oh, Beth, I've missed you so. So did I, Faith said. All of us did. Her sister-in-law Ruthie stood on the top step of the porch, rubbing her hands dry on a dish towel. Beth, it's right good to have you back. We've a lot to get done, so don't expect any rest. Beth saw Mellie pinch her lips together. Her poor sisters, having to live with Ruthie. She'd been with her for only a short while before her departure to Meadow Lark, and that had been enough. The wedding is at Jenny's parents' place, Faith said. I assumed as much, remarked Beth. She paid the van driver and hoisted her bag up the steps. We're helping with the wedding feast. Far as we can tell, we're going to be feeding 300 or so. Beth nodded. Eli would have invited the entire district, and she knew the majority of them would attend, especially since his wedding would be one of the first of the season. Jenny's asked me to be one of her nilhawkers, Mellie said. I feel real honored. So, she'll be sitting up front. Beth, you can sit with me during the service, Faith said. Beth pulled Faith into a quick side hug. Suits me fine. We'll be heading over there come 6:30 tomorrow morning, Ruthie informed Beth. Of course, I volunteered all of us to help with the preparations and such. Of course. How many days can you stay? Mellie asked. I taught this morning, Beth said. And I'll be here tomorrow all day, of course. I asked for Wednesday, too, and it was granted. But come Thursday, I'll be back in the schoolhouse. Mellie frowned. So soon? But I'm here now, aren't I? Beth asked. The laundry needs taken from the line, Ruthie said. Why don't you girls take care of that? I'll work on supper. Ruthie wadded up the dish towel and went back into the house. None of the sisters made a move toward the laundry line. How's Ma'am? Beth asked. About the same. She's resting, but she's excited to see you. She and Grandpa will be over for supper. Just then the family pony cart turned into the yard. Beth saw Eli driving it, and she gave him a wave. He waved back, stopped the cart, and flung the reins over the seat. He jumped out. Beth! You're here, he called. Beth hurried over to him. Happy wedding, she said with a huge smile. How are you? Just finished making the rounds. I had to make sure everyone was invited personally. His cheeks were flushed, and his expression was well pleased. I'm looking forward to the service tomorrow. How's Jenny? The flush on his cheeks deepened. She's right fine. I'd better help Ruthie with the laundry, then. I'll see you at supper. That you will, he said with a smile. Beth turned away and walked back toward the house. It was hard to think of Eli as a married man. The next time she saw him, he'd have a beard. Mellie met her close to the clothesline. I need to get back out to the sweet shop, she said. I'd love to have your help out there, but I think you'd best do the laundry. Beth grinned. I think you're right. If you have a minute, come on out. It hasn't been overly busy, but busy enough. You're closing tomorrow, right? Yes. Of course. I'm putting a notice in the window. Mellie frowned. Oh, I forgot something. Beth, can you watch the shop for a few minutes? I'll tell Ruthie you'll be right back, but I forgot to grab the loaf of nut bread I promised Mrs. Winger. Of course. Take your time. I'm fine out there as long as Ruthie doesn't have my hide. Beth laughed, glad once again that she didn't have to live with the woman any longer. Mellie headed back to the house, and Beth went on out to the small building at the edge of their property. Dat and Grandpa had built the shop for Mellie years before, and Mellie had been bringing in a tidy profit for some time now. But more important, Mellie loved it. The girl was born to bake. Beth pushed open the window door to the tinkle of a bell. She paused and breathed deeply. The sweet smell of cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves filled the air. If she went real still, she could even smell the raisins and fruit pieces Mellie liked to sprinkle throughout her breads. Beth walked to the counter and saw one batch of cinnamon rolls left. She smiled. They were usually the first to go once Mellie opened in the morning. Truth was, Mellie's rolls melted in your mouth. Beth pondered opening the package and snitching one, then she shook her head. Sure as anything, someone would come right in and want a full batch, and there wouldn't be one left. Beth bent down and retrieved the cash box from its hiding place beneath the counter. The bell rang again, and Beth looked up, expecting Mellie. But it wasn't Mellie. Beth's breath caught in her throat as she looked at the visitor. Caleb, she murmured. He stopped short. His face blanched, and then he smiled, albeit forced. Beth. Home for the wedding? Yes. She looked at him. Looked at his kind eyes with their flecks of gold. He'd removed his straw hat, and she saw that his hair still stuck out a bit funny around his cowlick. She'd forgotten how tall he was. Timothy Plank was tall, too. But Caleb had him beat. How are you? He hung back near the door, as if ready to flee at a moment's notice. I'm well. And you? She asked. Good. And you're teaching? She thought she detected a hint of resentment in his tone, but she decided she was wrong. His expression was guarded, but he was making an effort. She saw that clearly. I love it, she answered simply. It was strange to be standing there, alone, with her former beau. She'd thought she would feel more for him. Certainly, she felt a bond, considering their past, but there was no energy to it. Mostly what she felt was sad. Sad that she'd broken his heart. Sad for the entire episode. Episode? How harsh to think of their courtship as an episode. She was glad Caleb couldn't read her mind. He wouldn't be pleased with her choice of words. Well, I was looking for Mellie, he said. He gripped his hat tightly, crunching the brim in his large hands. She'll be here in a second. She went to fetch some bread. Beth smiled at him, not knowing what else to chat about. The two of them seemed beyond idle talk. He nodded and leaned against the doorframe. He had yet to really step foot into the shop. Through the window, Beth spotted Mellie approach. She came to the door, pausing behind Caleb. Hello, Caleb, Mellie said. She glanced at Beth, and her eyes were shadowed. "Hello, Mellie." Caleb put his hat back on his head. "Well, I'll be going." He looked from Beth and then back to Mellie. With a quick movement, he was out the door and gone. Mellie didn't move. Her face looked stricken. "Was he here to see you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Beth came around the counter. "Of course not, Mellie. He came to see you. But why? And why'd he leave so quick like?" "Because I'm here, and he doesn't want to see me," Beth said matter-of-factly. "Are you sure, Beth?" Mellie stepped inside the shop. She looked ready to buckle. "Mellie," Beth cried, going to her. "Of course, I'm sure. He has no interest in me, and I have no interest at all in him. None whatsoever. Except as a beau to you. My interests lie elsewhere." As soon as the words escaped her lips, Beth's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes grew huge, and she stared at her sister in shock. What on earth had possessed her to say that? One simply didn't, say such things out loud. Beth had lost her mind. There was no other excuse for it. She'd completely lost her mind. Mellie gaped at her, and then a slow smile spread across her face. "Timothy Plank," she whispered. Beth tried to swallow, but her throat was so full of emotion, she couldn't do it. This time, it was Beth who was ready to buckle. Mellie stepped forward and grabbed her sister by her arms. She led her to the chair in the corner behind the counter and sat her down. "Breathe, Beth," she said. "Breathe." But Beth couldn't breathe. She didn't want to be in love with Timothy Plank. She didn't want to be in love with anyone. Her life was ruined. Ruined. And besides, she'd burned her bridges, hadn't she, when she'd so rudely cut Timothy off after the recent preaching service. "Beth, for heaven's sake, it's not the end of the world, you know. Surely, he'll grow to love you, too. You don't have to worry." Beth shook her head and felt a trembling start deep within her stomach. "No, that's not it." "No." "Then what is it?" "He does love me," she choked out. And the minute the words were said, she knew they were true. Timothy Plank loved her. And she loved him back. "Tell me," Mellie said, her voice concerned. "If I love him, I can't teach." Her shoulders slumped forward and confusion swirled through her. "Why can't you?" "Because I'll get pregnant, that's why." "Fine. So you get pregnant. And wouldn't that be just awful?" Mellie was being sarcastic, of course. She looked at Beth with both love and pity. "You might not get pregnant for a whole year or more, you know." Beth's eyes welled with tears. "And Beth, if you do, you'll have a class of 4 right there in your very own home." Beth looked up at Mellie as the tears spilled onto her cheeks. "You love his children already. I know you do. It's been completely obvious from your letters." It was true. Beth loved Timothy's children as her own. Mellie knelt down beside her. "I have a question for you." Beth waited. "If Timothy Plank married someone else, someone willing to marry him, how would you feel?" It was as if Mellie had pierced Beth's heart with a hot knife. How would she feel? As if her world had stopped, that was how. Is teaching always going to be enough for you, Beth? Would you really be happy to have another woman share Timothy's life, raise his children? Beth began to cry. No, no. I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't. Mellie put her arms around her. Beth, she said quietly. You love him. Beth rested her head on Mellie's thin shoulder. But would another year or 2 of teaching be enough to fulfill her need? And was it true that she never wanted to marry? Never? She shuddered. She was asking the wrong question, and she knew it. It wasn't about getting married anymore. It was about Timothy. Did she want to marry Timothy? Did she want to share his life? Did she want to raise a family with him? But she'd rejected him. When he'd asked to take her on a buggy ride, they'd both known what he was really asking. And she'd said no. She shuddered again. Do you think it's too late? Mellie pursed her lips. You told me it wasn't too late for me and Caleb. So, I guess you can answer your own question. Beth sat up straighter and wiped her cheeks. No, the Lord God willing, it wasn't too late. She stood and smoothed down her apron. And Caleb, she asked. How is it going with him? Mellie sighed and shrugged. So. But it's never too late, right? Never too late, Beth answered. The wedding was long and beautiful. Beth sat next to her mother and sister. She was grateful that her mother felt good enough to attend, although she was deeply aware of her mother's labored breathing. More than once her mother had twitched as if a shard of pain had gone through her, and Beth was sure it had. Mellie said that their mother was much the same, but Beth saw signs of her rheumatoid arthritis worsening, and it broke her heart. Jenny looked lovely in her pale purple wedding dress. Her face radiated with love for Eli, but all Beth could think about was Timothy. If they were to marry, would she look as ethereal as Jenny? And how would Timothy gaze at her? With the same look of joyous love she saw on Eli's face? When the extremely long sermon was over, and Jenny and Eli had answered the minister's questions, Beth gave a sigh of relief. The minister blessed the couple. Testimony was given, and it was done. Beth had a new sister-in-law. And then the real flurry began as the men arranged the tables for the wedding feast, and the women got the food served. It was a blur of activity. Beth worked diligently, smiling at the appropriate times, and laughing when called for. But her mind was not there. Nor was her heart. Both were back in Meadow Lark. With Timothy. Chapter 8. It was Wednesday afternoon, and Beth was nearly back in Meadow Lark. I rightly remember taking you at the beginning of the school term, Isaac Grover said from the driver's seat. Glad it all has worked out for you. Beth nodded. Her hands gripped the edge of the seat in front of her. She was in the back on the right side, her eyes glued to the passing scenery. At the dizzying speed they were going, she'd be back in Meadow Lark in mere minutes. When would she see Timothy? Would she have to wait more than a week until the next preaching Sunday? Or would he pick up the girls after school that very next day? Isaac pulled into the Miller's drive and parked next to the wraparound porch. Here you be, Beth. Thank you, Isaac. She pulled out her purse to pay him. No. Your brother Dan paid my fee, he told her. Beth nodded. Thank you. She slipped out of the van, feeling the unmoving earth beneath her feet. She always felt a bit giddy after riding in a fancy car. Isaac had already grabbed her bag for her. Thank you, again, she said. He gave her a two-fingered salute and was off. Becky burst through the screen. You're back, she cried. Penny and Susan both tumbled out the door behind Becky. Hello, all of you, Beth said warmly. I missed you something terrible. We missed you, too, Penny said. But we liked having 2 days off, Susan said, giggling. Ma'am says to come in for some hot tea, Becky told her. All right. After you, Beth said, pulling the screen door wide. Beth was happy to be back at school and happy to see the children. She was particularly glad when Missy and Frances came in the door. Both girls ran up and placed themselves firmly on each side of her, as if that's where they belonged. Beth's heart swelled at their obvious affection. She was preoccupied when she taught that day. She hoped the children wouldn't notice, but her gaze continually swerved to the door, as if hoping Timothy Plank would walk in. Which was ridiculous. Not once since school started had he interrupted the teaching day with his presence. But it didn't stop her from checking. And checking. And checking again. It was as if she was powerless to do otherwise. During recess, they all trundled outside. The air was cold, and it looked like snow, but the children seemed antsy for some activity, so out they went. Beth herself was ready to go crazy with sitting inside. The older children played baseball on the frozen ground, and the younger children either played tag or foursquare. As for Beth, she stood under the tree and watched. Mostly the road, hoping to get a glimpse of Timothy passing. By the time the last song of the day was sung, and the floors were swept and the garbage emptied, Beth was exhausted. Something had to be done, because she didn't think she could survive another such day. As usual, Frances and Missy stayed back to wash the chalkboards. But Timothy didn't come for them. Finally, Beth asked, "Is your dad coming to fetch you today?" Missy crinkled her nose. "No. I don't think so." "So you're walking alone? Or is your grandmother coming?" "Dad told us we're big enough to walk by ourselves." Frances stuck out her chest proudly. "Maybe I spoke too soon," came a low, rich voice from the doorway. Beth swirled around to see Timothy standing in the door. His tall frame loomed, and his presence filled the room. "Timothy," Beth breathed. "Dad!" Frances cried. She ran across the room and leaped into her father's arms. "Where's Benny?" "At home with your grandmother," he said to Frances, but his eyes were on Beth. "I'm not quite done," Missy said, wiping down the lower corner of the board. "I'll wait," Timothy said. Still, his eyes were on Beth. She stood unmoving, unsure what to do now that he was actually there in front of her. All day long, she had yearned for him, and now, she felt completely unprepared, completely unsettled. Timothy put Frances down. "Missy, you're finished now. You two girls go on ahead. I'll follow. That way you can show me you're ready to walk alone like big girls." Frances and Missy wriggled into their coats and dashed out the door. "Not too fast, now," Timothy called after them. He turned to face Beth. The silence between them was massive. Beth felt sudden tears flood her eyes and she blinked, willing them away. But it was obvious that he'd seen them. His face softened, and he stepped closer. He stopped directly before her, so close that she could smell the earth and the hay and the outdoors on him. She took a great gulping breath. He raised his hand and traced his thumb down her cheek. "You're crying," he whispered. She looked down, ashamed. He touched her chin with his open palm and raised her face to his. "Why?" Because, how could she tell him? How could she tell him that she'd made a horrid mistake? That she loved him. That she did want to ride in his buggy with him. She couldn't possibly say such things to him. It would be unseemly. Forward. Brazen. But she needn't have worried. She didn't need to say a word. He knew. She saw it in the way his eyes glistened. She saw it in the look of joy on his face. "Beth," he said, his voice so low and husky, she barely heard it. "Beth," he repeated in a whisper. She smiled then, her face breaking forth in such a wide smile that it was like the sun had burst forth on a frozen gray day. "Timothy." She said his name now, and it felt like magic on her tongue. "You're back from the wedding." He touched her again, his hand gliding along her arm. She nodded, and her eyes were fixed on his. "I'm back." Her voice was quiet. "And I love teaching." The words burst forth without thought. "I know that." He smiled at her, a deep smile coming from his very soul. His expression was filled with such sweet longing, she was nearly unable to go on. She swallowed and cleared her throat. When I'm older, later, maybe much later, I may want to teach again. I don't know if I'd be approved. Beth. He leaned down and brushed his lips over her cheek. Her breath caught at the feel of his soft kiss, his tenderness, his love. Your age won't matter. You would be approved. You are a teacher, plain and simple. And then, without another word, he went to the wall, took her cape from the peg and draped it around her, his hands lingering on her shoulders. Together, they went outside and followed the girls down the road. The end. Thank you for listening to Leaving Hollybrook by Brenda Maxfield. Book 3 in Mellie's story is called The Fire. Watch for it soon. You can be assured that all Brenda's books are clean and wholesome. To find other romances by Brenda Maxfield, as well as the other authors at Tika House Publishing, visit www.tikahousepublishing.com. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next Brenda Maxfield Amish romance.